But at some point, people might start pushing back and saying, you know what? You're treating me like garbage and I am not okay with this. Then that person's having trouble. There isn't a definition of toxic relationship. So I think different people use it in different ways.
Dr. Leslie Becker-Phelps has been recognized for her expertise in psychology, self-awareness, and relationships. Her insights on attachment styles and emotional well-being have been shared through best-selling books and appearances on platforms like Call Her Daddy. With a deep commitment to personal growth, her work continues to guide many towards self-acceptance and healthier connections.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of 8 at the Table. Today's conversation is about 4 attachment styles. And today we have Dr. Leslie Becker-Phelps. And give us an introduction of, yourself and what you do and what you like to do, and tell the audience that is new to you and what you do.
I'm a psychologist. I have a practice in Basking Ridge, but I do a lot of writing. I've written 3.5 books. I have a YouTube channel, and I do a lot of teaching about mental health, about what I would call compassionate self-awareness, helping people to develop self-awareness from a compassionate perspective to help them to heal. And that's really what I try to get out there to people to help them.
It's definitely helped me. I stumbled upon your book. It was given to me. The first book I read was the Insecure in Love book, which helped me understand my partner a little bit better. And in that book, you had something about the 4 attachment styles. Mm-hmm. Can you just give us maybe one of the attachment styles that you deal with on a daily basis with some of your clients? Can I say clients?
I usually say patients.
Patients,
clients
yes,
works.
that's what I was looking for. With patients.
Yeah, sure. So probably the most common one that people struggle with and bring up is what I would call a preoccupied attachment style. It's people are very anxious. They feel like they're not lovable or they're not okay in some way. And they become preoccupied with getting the love, the attention, the acceptance from other people. And it really can overwhelm their lives and undermine their relationships.
So my thing is, I feel that being anxious in my mind is kind of new age. I'm 45. So I feel that I didn't hear the word anxious until maybe like 30s, late 30s. And this is when they're like, oh, I'm anxious and I'm this and I'm that. And I'll be like, what are you anxious about? And then it'll be explained to me, oh, I have got so much to do and I don't think I'm going to get it all done. And so my question would be, well, how important is it to you?
Question?
And then it'd be like, oh, it's very important. I got to get it done. I got to get it done. So I'm like, all right, well, get it done. And then their response would be, well, it's not that easy. And I was like, well, why is it not that easy? And it explained to me, that sounds easy to me. Mm-hmm. So for me, I don't feel that having a lot of tasks to do mm-hmm. is uncommon, 1, and 2, impossible. So I feel that if I have to get this done, then I'm going to do whatever I can to get this done, whether it's 4 or 5 things in front of that. Yep. And so I didn't think that it was highly functionally anxious. I just felt that I just have a lot of stuff to do and I have to get it done.
Okay.
And Alan was just trying to explain to me back in our day, not even our day, but we considered it nerves.
Yep.
Like, oh, you just got nerves, or you're nervous about it, or you're feeling a way about it. And so I can relate to that, having nerves.
Right.
But saying that I'm anxious, I just couldn't relate to.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's kind of like, it's got to get done.
Mm-hmm.
So when she's like, oh, you may be highly functioning because you have to get it done, and I just don't attach the anxious to it. It just has to get done.
Right. I get that. That's how I would relate to it.
Yeah.
But I think, like you said, anxiety has become like a thing, right?
Okay.
So I don't know that everybody's always talking about the same thing. Being anxious doesn't mean you have an anxious attachment style. Mm. And also, having nerves doesn't mean you're anxious in the way that perhaps your therapist was talking about it. Mm-hmm. So like in therapy, when I would talk with people about being anxious, I think of anxiety as you can have a fear of something, but you know that like if there's a hungry tiger in front of you, you're not anxious, you're afraid,
Yeah.
right?
That's a difference. Yeah.
Right. But if you don't, if there's nothing around that's making you kind of afraid, but you have that feeling, you'd call that like anxiety. One of the ways that I think about anxiety is it's when people aren't aware of what's upsetting them. So if there's something that you're having a hard time with and you kind of put it in the proverbial closet and then you put a whole bunch of stuff in the closet so you can go forward in life.
Okay.
If you can imagine a picture of that, like a cartoon, you can almost see the closet bulging and almost the lines next to it because it's vibrating. That vibration is the anxiety you feel. So you're feeling the anxiety, but you don't know what's behind it.
Even though you stuffed all the stuff in the closet.
Yeah, but you don't always know that you're doing it. Or you know that you did it, but you're not really thinking about it. So there's levels of awareness. Like sometimes you're like focused on something. Sometimes things are in your periphery. Sometimes things are a little bit far off, so you don't see it, even though you originally put it there.
Yeah.
So you can have all those levels. So sometimes when you're feeling anxiety, it's because there's something that's hard for you to face or that you put aside that you're feeling the emotion of, even though you're not intellectually thinking about the thing.
Okay.
Did that make sense?
Yes, but then I have like a follow-up question.
Good.
Okay.
Follow-up questions are always good.
So back to the closet bulging and all that stuff that's in there. My thing is, what's going on when you're putting the stuff in there? Are you forgetting that you're putting so much stuff in the closet, or are you unaware that you're putting more stuff, or are you avoiding being aware of the stuff you're putting into the closet to make it bulge? Like, are those 3 different steps? Is that a different process?
There's different situations that come up in different people. So people use it differently. We all have times where it's best, it makes sense to put stuff in the closet and not deal with it in the moment. Like it wouldn't be appropriate if you're all of a sudden you're having some grief and you're in the middle of a work meeting. Like that's not the time to break down and cry and start talking about your grief. So you put it in the closet. Nothing wrong with that. But for some people, they struggle so much with anything that makes them upset or maybe particular things, and that becomes how they cope. When it becomes how you cope, then the closet's bulging and it's hard for you to know what it is that anxiety is.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So then it really takes some conscious effort to say, gosh, what am I feeling? What's going on for me? So that you can get that self-awareness so that you can then begin to address what you need to address.
Okay. But in the end, if in the end it's too much and each time it's too much, then what part is that person missing that say, hey, listen, I need to stop this now and I need to address this now? Like what stage is that? Where it's like, I know that I'm going to have to deal with that at some point in time. And I know the outcome of me waiting. So what is the middle part called where like I deal with it right now, or I deal with it, or I give myself a time frame to deal with it?
I don't know the answer to what you're saying, but what I can tell you is when you're feeling something that doesn't feel okay, then you're kind of forced to deal with what's going on. So maybe that's the answer to your question. You have an experience. If you're someone who walks around anxious all the time and you're always talking fast and you can't take anything in and you're kind of like that, then you got to practice breathing, kind of come down, and then you can start to explore what's really happening.
Okay.
I encourage people to gain self-awareness. I use an acronym, STEAM.
Okay.
Because we can be aware on so many different levels. So the main levels are for STEAM. S is for sensations. What do you sense in your body? So if you feel your heart beating fast, your hands are tremoring, those are your sensations. T is thoughts. What are your thoughts? What are you thinking about your thoughts? So if your thoughts are, I'm such an idiot, or I'm useless, we can have thoughts running in our head all day, but we're not paying attention. It's to actually pay attention to the thoughts. E is emotions. People often confuse emotions and thoughts. So, how are you feeling? I'm feeling like I'm such an idiot, or I'm feeling like I'm worthless. Worthless might be one, but I feel like I'm like an idiot or I'm a failure. That's a thought as opposed to an emotion. Emotion, sad, hurt, angry, fearful, those things. And then for STEAM, actions, what are the actions you're taking? So if you do something that where you're self-sabotaging, right? you're in a relationship, and every time you get in a relationship, you you do these multiple texts to your partner, and you're calling them all the time, and you don't trust them, and you're doing all that stuff. Those are your actions, right? And then M, we could talk about that later, but it's mentalizing. It's basically pulling all that stuff together to understand what's happening. The more self-awareness you have, then the more you can kind of work through whatever the struggles you're having. We started with anxiety. You can be like, oh, wow, I'm sensing it in my body. I'm having these emotions. It's connected to these thoughts. The fuller picture you have, the richer picture you have, the more you can then empathize with what you're feeling, have compassion for what you're feeling, and work toward making the changes you need.
It makes sense when you put it in that order. It makes sense. Okay, so then once you become more self-aware and you realize, hey, these traumas are based off of things that happened in my childhood. Okay. How do you go about not making that like a life sentence and moving past that and saying, this is what happened in the past, and now I want to work through that?
I really encourage people to think about what's happening rather than why. If you say, well, why am I like this? Well, it's because I had an abusive childhood. This happened and that happened. You're like, okay, now what? But if you say, what's happening? Oh, what's happening is I'm believing that I'm worthless, and I am kind of imagining that people are going to be rejecting me. These are the what's happenings. I'm feeling afraid. This is what's happening. Now you're really connecting to the experience rather than just like labeling it as an outside thing. By connecting with the experience and understanding that, then we're back to, or having, empathy and compassion. I call that compassionate self-awareness. Right? So you have this compassionate self-awareness. That in itself is healing. So for instance, so we're talking about childhood trauma. If you imagine that you had a younger self who went through, right? That's the younger self who went through whatever that childhood trauma was. That child sense is still in pain. During childhood, you have experiences one upon another, and it sets a circuitry in your brain. Your brain gets wired a particular way to think certain ways, feel certain ways. It's all wired. So there are certain things that happen in the present that reactivate that wiring. So it's almost like that child is still in there. You've heard people talk about child work, right?
Yeah.
It's like that child is still in there. The way you can help heal is you connect with that child. So you realize, oh, I have this adult part of me that understands. It could be compassionate. I have this child part of me that's really afraid and feels alone and never had anyone to be caring, right? So imagine, if you have a child, or just know a young child, or a good friend, doesn't matter. If they were struggling, how would you respond to them? You wouldn't say, you idiot, why don't you get it together? You'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you're feeling that way. That's really hard. And then you kind of with them, and then that feels better, right? If you've ever had someone just be caring towards you, even without fixing or changing anything, it just feels better. You feel more positive. You have the sense of, oh, I can go forward. So you can do that. You can learn to do that within yourself, to have that kind of inner dialogue and begin to respond differently to the things that trigger, or to that younger part of you that gets triggered, to be anxious or afraid or angry or whatever.
Okay.
Is this making sense?
Yeah, I definitely. So with that being said, if you're unaware that this trauma has stemmed from childhood, how does that show up in an attachment style in a romantic relationship? How does that look?
Okay. Would it be okay if I take a few steps back and talk about our attachment system?
Okay. Absolutely.
And then what an attachment style is, and then I think it'll all make sense.
Yeah, let's start from the beginning. Got it.
Start from the beginning.
Let's do it.
All right. When man first roamed the earth,
dinosaurs.
Yeah, with the dinosaurs. No, it goes actually back to survival. It's part of our drive to survive. That for humans, we're not the fastest. We can't fly above. We're not the strongest. But as a community, we come together, and we've been able to really thrive because of the community piece. So a baby's born into the world, they are not going to survive on their own. That is not happening. They have to look to a caretaker, someone older and wiser. So even infants will look to the caretaker and look them in the eye, and they kind of grab them, right, by just the look. There's that connection. And that need to connect is part of our attachment system. It helps us to survive physically in the world, because even as an infant, but even as kids get older, they still need the community. Even as adults, really, if we were alone in the world, that's not going to work. We have to connect. So there's a biological drive to connect, to attach to other people.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
So that is to keep us physically safe, but it also helps us emotionally, because we have to be able to actually do the connecting with other people, feel emotionally connected. So that drive to connect is for physical survival as well as kind of an emotional survival. Okay? So you have the baby being held, say, by mom or dad. Child's looking to the parent's eyes, parents looking down to them, or caretaker, whoever that is. And when the person who's caring for them responds in ways that shows that they're attuned to the baby, then that baby is feeling better and secure. So if the baby starts crying and the parent shows a sense of, oh, I get you're distressed and it's going to be okay, which is kind of like, oh, honey, oh, like something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You're showing a sense of you get the distress, and you're also doing some soothing. This happens in so many different ways with infancy, childhood, like all through life. Each time it gets wired in a sense of I'm okay. Even though I'm crying, I'm okay. And even though I'm crying, or when I cry, the person who's taking care of me is going to be there for me.
Okay.
Okay. So what's getting wired in is a model of self, who you are, to a degree of like how lovable, acceptable, I'm okay. Then it's like it's a range all the way from that all the way to I'm unlovable, I'm unacceptable, I'm deficient, I'm essentially flawed, something like that. There's this range.
And that's from the actions of the parent that's giving that.
It's the back and forth.
Okay.
Right. There's this yes, but strongly from the parent, but back and forth. So the more the parent is attuned and showing the caring and acceptance of the child, no matter what's going on for them, the more the child gets, hey, I'm okay. Also, at the same time, the child is taking in, oh, when I'm upset, this significant other is there for me. They're emotionally available. And you can go, again, it's a range from, oh, they're there, they're emotionally available, all the way to they're not available. And it could either be they're just not there, they're not competent to help me, they're hostile toward me. It could be a lot of things, but they're not there. So we have this model of other and model of self. And that gets wired in through our childhood. It becomes a foundation of our connections, the way we connect. It's interesting, even to ourselves. So we think of like, oh, myself. But the truth is, all of us, we have like an inner dialogue. So we have a dialogue within ourselves. We relate to ourselves in kind of a social kind of way. Mm-hmm. So you have that model of self and model of others. That becomes your foundation. But every experience you have can shift and change it. Thus, it's important for us to talk about it and understand it because you can make changes in your life, like to how you relate to yourself and relate to other people. I think you were asking about attachment styles. I know I backed up a lot.
Yeah, it's fine.
But so with the model of self, if we just look at that, and for anybody who's watching, listening, it's how you relate to yourself, how acceptable, lovable, okay you feel. People who feel like, hey, I'm good. Like even when I'm having a hard time, I'm good. I feel solid. That's a more secure way of feeling. People on the other end of the spectrum who feel like, I'm not okay. There's something essentially wrong with me. I am flawed. I'm deficient. Something wrong with me. Just to be in the world causes anxiety because they always feel like they're not up to it. Like they're not okay. They have what we would call an anxious attachment style. People, that's in relation to the model of themselves. Then in relation to the model of others, if you're someone who sees other people as emotionally available to you. So if you're upset, you can turn to others for support. That's a more secure way of being. Okay. The other end of the spectrum, I can't turn to other people because they're going to be hostile. They're not going to show up. They're not going to make me feel better. I'm not being vulnerable like that to anybody because that's not going to end up well. What are they going to do? They're going to avoid relationships, or they'll be in relationships because we all need them, but emotionally they will be avoidant. Mm-hmm. And we would call that an avoidant attachment style. Interestingly, people who have an avoidant attachment style tend to avoid themselves too. So if you avoid other people, like you're not looking to your partner or somebody close to you to be helpful, but when you get upset, rather than being able to turn to yourself, you're like, I can't deal with that. So this kind of person is just gonna, I feel good about me, but so long as I don't have to look at any of that crap, you know.
And that would be the person that puts it into the closet.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So, but people who feel good about themselves but do that, they do it by ignoring so much. They're going to dismiss how they're feeling. They dismiss what other people, like if you have a partner who wants to help you out, you're like, whatever. You're going to dismiss other people. You dismiss how you're feeling. And we would call that a dismissing attachment style. It's very specific. So avoidant is just you avoid other people. Dismissing is a little bit more specific in that you're dismissing other people and you dismiss yourself.
Okay. Now, when you're dismissing other people and yourself, none of that can fall into being so secure in yourself?
No. See, this is the thing. It may look like you're secure because a lot of times people who have a dismissing attachment style, they can be very successful in the world. They prioritize their work. They prioritize what they're doing. They feel like they're confident. They're going out into the world. That's wonderful. But what happens is the relationships aren't so positive. They don't have the closeness. Mm. Okay. So that may be fine for people. Some people, they may be good. The more extreme it gets, the more likely they're going to have some troubles. And at some point, let's say they're married. You can be married and dismissing. You don't value your partner so much and you stay on track with your career. But at some point, people might start pushing back and saying, you know what? You're treating me like garbage and I am not okay with this. Then that person's having trouble. And maybe not people who are at the real extreme, but people a little less extremely dismissing. I might see them. I do a lot of marriage counseling. Those people who are dismissing or avoidant may come into marriage counseling or relationship counseling because they're brought in by their partner.
Yeah,
they don't really think it's a problem. Like they don't think it's a problem, but they don't want to lose their partner. And the partner's like, yeah, this isn't working for me. Mm. So then they'll come in because they're not having the problem, but they are not wanting to lose the partner. Okay. Is this making sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So in that case, if with a person with a dismissive attachment style, mm-hmm. and the partner brings them into marriage counseling, is that person willing to cross over, or are they doing it to basically appease their partner?
That is the question, isn't it? Because if they're willing to really truly work at it, mm-hmm. then their partner will feel better. The relationship will be stronger, right? They'll be able to learn to be more vulnerable. This is all about survival, right? So you don't want to be vulnerable to threat. I can tie this back. So being emotionally close feels like a threat to those people because they can't trust them, right? If I'm open to you, if I'm a dismissing person or avoidant person, and I'm emotionally open to you, my expectation, even if I'm not thinking about it, my expectation is you're not going to be there. I'm going to open myself up and be all like vulnerable. And you're either going to be hostile toward me or you're not going to show up or you're going to be incompetent. Why am I going to do that?
Yeah.
So I'm protecting myself. So someone who might be willing to consider opening up will get a lot from the therapy. If they're not and they stay that way, then their partner has some decisions to make. Yeah. But it's not usually all or nothing. There's some shift here or not there, or.
But it is shiftable to come from dismissive to do some work or do the work mm-hmm. and become more secure. Or what I'm saying is the spectrum, can it go in a circle? Can a romantic partner push somebody into an insecure attachment style if they were secure?
This is all, it's all organic, right? So we're not stones. It's not like set in stone. So someone who is, say, with a secure partner, it means someone who's truly has a secure attachment style, they have a model of self where they feel like they are lovable, and they have a model of others where they feel like I can trust the other people. So that's a secure person. If someone is in a relationship with a secure person, it can help them pull them towards more secure, to being more secure. So let's say you're anxious. Take the anxious attachment style. If they're feeling very anxious and they have a partner who's secure, then they feel the acceptance, right? And with time and a positive relationship and being accepted, even when they're having a hard time or things aren't going well, it can help them move towards being more secure. So I explained the dismissing style, right? That's the person who has a model of self where, yeah, I feel good, but model of others, I don't trust other people. In the anxious category, someone who relate to themselves, people who relate to themselves as not lovable, but they think other people are available to them. Well, this is good. When I'm having a hard time, I'm going to turn to the other people because they can be there for me. That's great, except I'm not lovable. I'm not acceptable. So for me to get them to be there for me, I better earn it. And so then you have them like, they're trying really hard. I'm going to be like, I have to earn a lot of money so people will like me. Or I have to get prestige, or I have to be so nice. And they are so giving and so nice, like over the top, because I need to earn that caring. I need to earn that acceptance and that love. I become preoccupied with getting that. We call that a preoccupied attachment style. You with me? So if that person is in a relationship with someone who is securely attached, sometimes what can happen is that person is able to, the securely attached person is able to get across to their preoccupied partner that I love you. You lose your money, it's okay. You know, you lose your job, I'm still there. And if they get the message that they are loved for who they are, not what they do, they're not earning it, it just is, then that helps them shift toward, wow, I am a lovable person. Now we're moving that range
from the anxious,
from the I'm not okay, along that range towards I am okay, I am lovable. You could be a relatively secure person, and somehow you get into a relationship with someone who's abusive, and you don't leave because of whatever reasons. Over and over and over again, you get abused, and you start to believe it, and you start to feel not good, and that gets reinforced, and that can help you be less secure. So this stuff...
So it goes back and forth.
It can move, depending on your experiences. The thing is, people who are securely attached are more likely to want to stay with someone who is either securely attached or remember, these are ranges, or somewhat closer to securely attached. They're not going to, if somebody starts treating them like garbage right from the beginning, they're like, this I don't need, and they're gone. So you're going to have it happen more often that they're in healthier relationships just because they're also choosing people who are healthier to begin with.
Okay.
But remember, it's all ranges.
Yeah. So how about the people that are fixers that go into a relationship and want to fix another person? Could they start off as secure and see that they're dealing with somebody who is preoccupied or anxious, and they're trying to bring them over to their secure side?
So the thing about fixers by itself, it doesn't say everything about their attachment style. So you may like to help people and be secure, but you may like to help people because you cannot tolerate, you're actually seeing the person as needing to be fixed. So you could actually be anxiously attached, like, oh, I'm going to make you better. Like, I'm going to do these things, as opposed to like, okay, I can accept you for who you are and just be with you. Make sense? It depends upon where the motivation's coming from. That's why the labels, in my mind, are less important than the motivation. The, what's going on for you.
The intention behind the action is...
Intention behind the action. That is key. Okay. And it also, it helps you to know if you're looking at yourself and you're saying, I don't know that I feel adequate. I feel inadequate, or I feel not lovable, or something like that. If you know that, then you can be like, oh, my relationship with myself, or my model of self, is more towards being anxious. That I can focus on. I can focus on, how do I help myself move from feeling like I'm not lovable or I'm not adequate to feeling more adequate, to feeling, to having self-love or self-acceptance. At least you know what you're targeting. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, we're just talking about romantic partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
What are the effects of an anxious or an anxious attachment style? Does that get transferred to your children or to the children of those people? Or is it almost as if an anxious person kind of understands that now I have a child in the world, so I need to be secure for them? Is there like a break from that, or that has to be done with work before that can happen? Is kind of what I'm saying.
Yes.
I feel that I look at it as kind of like a maternal thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that when women say they have children, a switch goes off, and like now they're super mom, but they've never healed that anxious part of them or their preoccupied part of them.
Mm-hmm.
So how does it look growing up with a parent has an anxious attachment style that hasn't done any work to?
It is a good question. I'll start more broadly, which is, you bring your attachment style with you through your life. It can show up in work. It shows up with your children. It shows up with your friends. It shows up all over the place. It may look different in different environments. So that's also really important. You can be more securely attached when you're at work, with interacting with those work relationships, and less securely attached in romantic relationship, or more securely attached with friends, because what's bringing out the insecurity is the vulnerability. So maybe with friends, you don't feel vulnerable enough, so you can be vulnerable with them because it just doesn't go as close to the heart. So you can be totally more secure with friends, but boy, you get in a romantic relationship and it comes apart. So it can shift and change both across different domains in your life, and also across your life. You might start out one way and then change as you get older, or, have different experiences. And also, coming back with the different relationships, you might be, say, insecure in love relationship. Maybe you're more securely attached regarding your children. You still have the insecurity, but maybe it's not tapping the insecurity as much because, you're in control. The situation's different. But what I've also seen a lot is there are people who know I'm insecure, whether it's insecure attachment style, or I just feel insecure as a person. I don't want to pass this along to my children. I've got to work on this. And so there are people, I don't know that it's flipping a switch exactly, but they become more conscious.
Like
now
more aware.
They're more aware and they're more motivated.
Okay.
Because, there's times where you may not be willing to do something for yourself that you would absolutely do for someone you care about. So things that they may not be willing to work on for themselves, but then they look at their child and they're like, I don't want to pass this to my child.
Mm-hmm.
Now they have a new motivation.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that a lot. And I think that's a good motivation, But there are certainly parents who aren't as aware or can't get over it, get through it. And the insecurity shows up with the child. So the child, say, gets upset, and now they become all upset, and they can't, their anxiety goes through the roof because they can't tolerate seeing their child upset. Consequence of that, the child learns it's not okay to get upset, whether that's sad or angry or whatever it is upset is for the child. They learn that my mom or my dad or whoever it is going to come apart if I show this. And so the child will learn to, there's different reactions. One reaction could be learning to hold it together, and now they feel like it's their responsibility to make sure mom or dad or whoever is okay. That becomes a problem. When you think your job is to take care of the other people, you lose your sense of who you are. You're not lovable for you anymore. You become like an instrument of that relationship. But that's just one outcome, but different things can happen. Yeah. So that can be problematic. And then you carry that way of seeing yourself in yourself as well as in relationships forward in your life. So It may be that as an adult, you find yourself in relationships. You're so busy taking care of the other people, you don't really attend to yourself. You lose yourself because you learned early on you're not important. Keeping the other people happy, that's what's important.
Mm.
And that, can fall apart in trying to have a happy life. I was going to make another point about the parenting piece, but I forget what it was.
Okay. It sounds like what I'm gathering is it sounds like people pleasing and but I feel like overcompensating could fall into any of the 4 categories, because you can overcompensate because you're anxious and you don't feel that you're good enough.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the preoccupied is you're overcompensating because, again, you don't feel like you're good enough, and now you're letting the material things represent you, because that's who essentially you believe you are. You are your material things.
You feel like you need to earn the love. You need to earn the acceptance.
And could the secure be an overcompensating thing with, like, I'm strong and I've got you and I'll be able to fix you?
No, I mean, secure means you feel good in yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? I feel lovable. I'm okay in that deep, solid okay. So that's good. And you also see other people as emotionally available to you. That's secure.
Okay.
So when you're able to be in that space, the more strongly you're in that space, the more you can also tolerate other people having struggles. So you may want to help them, but you're unlikely to lose your identity to that, because you don't feel like you need to do that. You got to make the other person better for you to be okay. You already feel okay. So you may try and help your partner, but at some point you're like, I'm losing too much of me in this. And you're able to draw a line there. So you may be somebody who likes to help others. That's not a problem. The problem is when you lose yourself to that relationship. And if you're secure, the more secure you are, the less likely that's going to happen. Remember, none of these categories of attachment styles are locked in. There's different ranges of how you could be, and it can shift and change, but there are themes.
Okay. So there's no definite that, hey, an avoidant attachment style works best with an anxious attachment style. There's no definite that there's nothing that could say these two are the ones that are always going to work, tried and true.
No, because people are more than their attachment styles, and each attachment style can present itself in so many different ways. But you can say someone who's more extreme is going to have more of a problem in relationships.
Ooh, how so?
Well, because you asked me before, if somebody's a dismissing attachment style and their partner brings them in, that mean they're going to change for their partner? Well, if they're really more extreme, really cannot accept that their partner's going to be there for them, and they're more rigid around that, that's really hard, because any relationship takes some give and take, and they're less able to do that. That's a problem.
Okay, so nowadays we hear a lot about toxic relationships where it seems like 2 toxic people get together, or that's what they're saying. Is that because these 2 toxic people are in the same attachment style category and they seem perfect for each other?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it where they're just not self-aware that the other one is toxic because they're too secure or they're too avoidant? Is there something that kind of gives that away?
Good question. And I'm going to back it up a little bit and talk about the word toxic. And you also mentioned trauma. So I'm going to talk about both of those.
Okay.
People talk about this. It's become part of the popular vernacular, so to speak. So the way people use it there isn't really a definition. It's like, if there was something that upset you in childhood, now you've had a traumatic childhood. I think in the field that I'm in, I don't necessarily equate because someone had some hard times as necessarily traumatic. There isn't a definition of toxic relationship. So I think different people use it in different ways. And I think that's an important thing to understand. That said, I think when people are talking about toxic relationships, what are they saying? They're saying the relationship is really harmful to the person and they don't leave. I mean, it could be toxic, but generally, if it's really harmful and they've left, we haven't hit the point where you're talking about a toxic relationship. You're like, ooh, that guy is toxic, that woman's toxic. But it wasn't a toxic relationship because you didn't hang around for it, right? Because they were harmful to you. But if you stay in it, and both people keep coming back to it, and they are harming each other again and again, that's my understanding when people say toxic. And what you have is two people who can't walk away from, or choosing not to walk away from something that's harming them. So the more secure you are, the more likely you're going to look and say, this is harmful to me. I'm lovable. I don't deserve this. Or I expect that my partner is going to be there in a loving way for me and emotionally available for me, and they're not. This isn't working for me. So you can have less of those people because they're not hanging around for it. Someone who is anxiously attached, who feels like they're not lovable, or they feel flawed, or they feel deficient. Different words connect with different people, but something in that range. If they feel that way, then if they're with someone who's giving them the message that they're not okay in some ways, part of them's believing it, so they're not going to leave because, you know what? He's right. I'm really a horrible person, and, and so then they stay. And even though part of them's like, oh, I don't deserve this, there's a part of them that it connects in with and they're willing to stick around for because it's what they expect. If I told you to walk through that wall, you're not even going to try to walk through the wall because you're pretty sure that the wall's solid and you're just going to give yourself a headache every time you bump your head into it. But if you thought that you could walk through walls, you might keep trying to do it. You're like, I'm doing it wrong. That's what's happening to these people. They think that this is who I am, and I'm just not doing the relationship right. If I was just a little different, then my partner would treat me differently.
So there's no because it sounds like, when does codependency tie into that? Because it sounds like at some point in time, one person is more aware that it's not healthy for them, but they still stay.
Codependency comes from this idea of you are taking care of the other person to your detriment. So I always think in terms of if you have an alcoholic parent, or let's say there's an alcoholic wife, right? And the husband does everything he can to make sure that nobody notices she's alcoholic. He gets rid of the bottles. He makes sure that they don't, if she's too drunk to go to an event, he'll make excuses. They're trying to cover it all up. That person, that husband in that situation is codependent. So it's when you lose yourself to somebody else's sickness or illness, if you will. It's that overcompensating as opposed to addressing what's really happening. And it messes everybody up. It messes the kids up in that situation because they can't live an authentic life. They're not okay. Maybe it's them who's causing the drinking or whatever the situation is. So that's codependent.
Okay. Does any of that have to do with the husband enabling her?
That's exactly what it is.
Okay.
He is not only going along with it, he's enabling it by making sure that she doesn't feel the consequences of her actions. I think a lot of people, I would throw codependent into the list of terms that people use, they throw around.
Yeah.
Trauma, toxic relationships,
narcissist,
and codependent. And people mean different things. But when I think of it the way I described it. So if you're in a relationship with someone who maybe has an issue and you're like, it's not up to me to change them, to fix them. I'll deal with this. I'm not going to deal with that. That's not necessarily codependent. So I have some people who are like, well, maybe I'm codependent because I don't make my partner change. I'm not forcing them to give up drinking or drugs or whatever the thing is. So maybe I'm codependent because I allow them to be that way. No, that's not codependent. It's just you're not trying to take over their lives. But if you are saying, well, I'm not going to get in the car with you when you're driving, that's setting up an appropriate boundary. Driving them home because they're intoxicated is not codependent. Making excuses for them to all your friends so that nobody knows what's going on, that's codependent.
Okay.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah, you're breaking it down. Okay. What else I got for you?
I don't know. What else you got for me?
I'm really trying to tap into how it affects the kids, though, as far as the attachment styles. Um, and we'll say an avoidant, how does avoidant look in an attachment style towards with children?
Right.
Like, how does that?
Kid flips out and dad walks out the door. The kid's crying and he says, "Really? You're just so oversensitive. What's your problem?" Or maybe he doesn't say it, but he gives off that vibe. Or is just non-responsive.
Okay, so would it be slightly safe to say a lot of, or single parent homes where, well, because you said him, we'll say that the fathers have left, they were avoidant, more avoidant than dismissive, or
I don't know.
Like, there could be any issue.
It could be any issue that could cause somebody to leave. Right. So I wouldn't, just because the person left doesn't mean they were avoidant.
Yeah,
I mean, it could be, but
that was just the first thing I went to.
Yeah,
I saw it in my head.
Sure. And it's tricky because it's not, the struggles people have are beyond attachment style. I think attachment style is huge, but it's not everything. So let's say you have a parent, mother or father, who's say very ill, has cancer, is going for chemo, is in and out of the hospital. They're not emotionally available to the child. The child is going to have struggles based on that, but it's not because the parent was avoidant. The parent was sick.
Yeah.
And so not available. The child isn't necessarily able to differentiate that, or even if they understand it intellectually, it's still emotionally can struggle. So everything isn't attachment style per se that's having an influence. Okay.
Would a parent being sick and having a child, would that fall into, like, growing up with them, would that fall into like more of a traumatic experience for the child?
Mm-hmm.
Because when the child gets older, I'm not saying the child seeks sick people, but it kind of attaches, I need to be there for someone to take care of them. They're not able to show me emotions, but I need to be there for someone to take care of.
That could happen. I mean, it could also be where they don't necessarily feel like they need to take care of someone, but they feel like they're not going to be taken care of. They're not going to get the attention, the love. Maybe there's something they feel not lovable because they just didn't get it.
Get it, yeah.
I mean, maybe the other parent is able to give them the attention, but maybe not, because when you have a spouse who's very sick, sometimes you can't, or let's say there's another sibling who's really ill and the parents attend to the sibling, and then the other child is really going to struggle.
Yeah. Right?
And I think it's really important to be sensitive. It's not like the parents are doing something wrong. Sometimes life is just hard. It just throws stuff at us that's beyond what we can deal with, either because of our limitations or just human limitations. It's just the nature of it. So it's definitely more than attachment style per se. And then there's just experiences like somebody with ADHD. If it's hard to attend, if they have really high ADHD, that can interfere with being able to bond and connect because you can't keep your attention there, right? Or someone people talk all the time now, autism, being on the spectrum, right? That's the big thing out there. Somebody who's on the spectrum, it's going to affect their ability to connect. I mean, it is like quite literally a disorder of the attachment system.
Autism.
Yeah, because it's the inability to connect emotionally. So it's not like somebody's, the more along the spectrum of autism, the farther along, the less somebody's actually able to, they just don't have the biological wiring to connect emotionally in that way. And so that's very much related to your attachment style. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm thinking about two people with autism in a relationship.
Yep.
How does that work?
I don't know who those two people are, but again, autism, they talk about the spectrum. People are on a spectrum. It doesn't mean they can't relate at all. Mm-hmm. It means there's limitations to it. And so it's whatever the limitations are. I don't know how those two people, somehow they're able to connect. And maybe they can connect in ways that are absent some of the level of emotional intimacy you or I might need, but the levels that they need kind of match up and it works.
Works for them.
It works for them.
Yeah.
which brings me to another point. I think this is one of the things I was going to say earlier. There isn't like, this is the way everybody should be. If everybody was just this, then we would be great, because we bring ourselves to it. And so you can have two people who are a bit anxiously attached or even dismissingly attached, and it works for them. And who's to say that that's wrong?
Mm-hmm.
You know? If it works for them, if you can look inside of yourself and you could say, you know, this isn't perfect, that's not perfect, because no relationship is, but it works for me. Like, ultimately, this makes me happy. I feel good about myself being in this relationship. It doesn't matter what any of these labels are. These are just ways of trying to understand, put our hands around something to help ourselves. But we don't want that to be the thing that we're shooting for. Ultimately, that is supposed to be in the service of trying to help us feel good about ourselves and good in relationship.
Okay, so with everybody having a podcast and the internet being so vast, how can you avoid the misinformation that's going out? And how can you go through the proper channels to find clinical, diagnosed facts? Do you have any suggestion for our audience?
Yeah. That is a very hard question to answer, because there's so much all over the internet. And I think we have, I say merged is probably the wrong word, but kind of lost the thread of what's entertainment and what's, worthy information, what's reliable information. And in this field, a lot of it's mushy anyway. So that's hard. I think you want to think about, am I watching this, listening because it's entertaining? Or am I really, what facts am I taking, quote, facts am I taking from here? Who's delivering the facts? How qualified are they? It's not like you have to have a degree in order to know the facts. But if you have a degree, hopefully, and if they have a degree from a legitimate institution, hopefully at least that there's that background. You may want to know, where are they, what are their sources? If you were to ask me, like, how do I know that attachment theory or attachment system really exists? Where does it come from? I can give you something, and it's not just like, oh, that feels good, but like somebody's really looked into this in a solid kind of way. Mm-hmm. So I think people need to really think about, does what they're saying resonate? Not does it feel good, but also intellectually, does it make sense? If I step back, are there, excuse me, what are my questions? Mm. Is what they're saying matching what other people are saying or not? And it's fine if everybody's not matching, but if you have a lot of qualified people lined up saying one thing, and this other person over here saying the other thing, even if you really like what they're saying, and it's intuitively seems like kind of cool, especially if it benefits you. I'm not saying don't believe it, because new ideas have to come from someplace, but you want to give it a second, third, fourth look and really know. Part of the problem of doing this is we have so much information coming at us all at once, like constantly, that nobody can go through all of those pieces of information and do the proper vetting. So one of it is having to slow things down, pick out what it is that you really want to know, or that the thing that you want to pursue, and say, okay, let me look at this thing. And then you can look at the sources and, what they're saying. What are the people who are saying something against it? What are they saying? Does that make sense? And you have to use your judgment in that way. It can help if you can get information from an impartial source. So with attachment theory, one of the things I can tell you is, since John Bowlby discovered or came up with this idea of attachment theory, so much research has been done, it's ridiculous. And there's all this research, and it's not every little piece of research is necessarily true. Maybe some of them are bad pieces of research. But you have so much of it showing in a certain direction that it gives you more understanding that, oh, maybe this is something solid. It makes sense that it's something solid. I guess aside from that, but interestingly enough to me, it's also been shown cross-culturally. So it's not just an artifact of being in the Western world. They've gone to different all different cultures and found that people have these basic attachment styles, which I think is interesting. It's kind of a sidebar, but the idea is that all this research has been done. So that can be helpful. But I do think you have to kind of say consciously, so you have to be willing to put the energy in, because so much we're just getting passively. We hear this stuff, it's coming into us passively, and next thing you know, we believe it, and we've never even tried to question it. So you have to consciously say, hey, what do I think about this? What do I think about the person saying this stuff? What do I think about the research behind it? What do I think?
I get that. Just do your own fact checking.
Do your own fact checking.
Like here at 8 at the table, we try to give you the facts. Mm-hmm. And that's why we have you on here, because you are giving us the facts from your experience and from your knowledge. Right. Another question I had for you.
Sure.
So now you hear a lot about be my peace. I want somebody to be my peace. And people say, or a lot of women say, I try to talk to this man and he just kind of pushes me aside. He doesn't want to hear about it. He said, listen, that's not true. Your feelings aren't facts. To me, I think that would be like an avoidant person. Mm-hmm. So do you have any tips on how you would like navigate an argument or navigate how to approach an avoidant person?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you're just starting to date the person, you may want to find somebody else. That would be my first thing. But if you're actually in the relationship, I think at a time separate from when you're having an argument or there's an issue, you sit down and you try to have the conversation about feelings. I'm in this relationship with you, not because there's some kind of factual database that tells me I should be here, but because I care about you. I feel emotionally connected to you. I feel warm toward you. That's important. The database could still say, oh, we line up on paper, we fit together. But if I'm not feeling it, if those emotions aren't there, I won't have anything. So when I'm telling you about my emotions, if you're not listening, you're missing the point of our relationship. And in the end, depending upon whether you're willing to go this far, in the end, we're not going to have a relationship left. You don't have to say it quite like that, but you get the idea.
Yeah. Get that,
because and couples do it all the time, forever, or repeatedly. In couples therapy, I'm pulling people back and saying, "This isn't a court of law. It doesn't matter if your partner has all the facts wrong. That's pretty much irrelevant. What's relevant is what your partner's saying, what they really believe. So if we're in an argument and we went out the other night and I'm saying you did something and I'm really angry about it. And you're like, I never did it. You can argue with me about the facts. And I'm going to still believe what I believe because that's my memory. Or you can pause and you can listen and you can say, wow, that's not my memory, but I get that's what you heard. And I can understand why that would make you angry. That's terrible. That's what you heard. And that's terrible that you felt that I would say that. And I am really sorry for my part in doing that to you. Because I care, and I don't want you to feel that way. Or you can argue the facts.
Yeah.
What's going to get you farther?
So be more empathetic to their feelings about how I can see how that made you feel that way.
Yeah. And then if it's something that there's pragmatically you actually have to figure out, if you do that piece first, right? And you were to say that to me, I'd be like, yeah, thank you. That makes me feel like we are a team. Mm. Now that we feel like we're a team, let's solve the problem. But now we're working together. If you're fighting me on the facts, we're going like this, we're not going like this. We want to move this to this, because then you can go forward. Or another way to think about it is you're on the same team. If you're like playing soccer or something, you want the ball in front of you. You want to be like moving it down, working together to move it toward the goal. You don't have to have the same perspective. You're going to have different perspectives. You're different people. Mm-hmm. You may have different techniques, but we're both wanting the same goal. If the ball is between us, if it's all about this, then if the ball's like between us, then it's blocking us from each other as opposed to putting it out here. And now we're both focused that way.
And this is a tip from couples therapy.
Yeah.
Okay. So with everything going on and the talk being for so long, what do you bring to the table? Can you give the audience what should be brought to the table to make a healthy relationship work? Not the 50-50, because apparently that hasn't worked for everybody. Mm-hmm. Not the traditional man paying for everything, because again, that's clearly not working for everybody. Do you have any suggestions on what the foundation should be to make this work for us so we can be happy?
I will do my best to answer that.
Let's do it.
It's a big question.
Okay.
I think, in my opinion, the issue is based in kind of in our culture. So there's been a cultural shift. I am old enough to, and I don't remember what year the movie came out, Kramer versus Kramer, with Dustin Hoffman, and his wife leaves him, and he has to raise his kid, and this was like big stuff. The idea that, was the court system going to give him the kid, but women are the ones who are supposed to raise children. There was cultural shifts back then. That movie hit big because of that shift. And we are still feeling that our culture is still trying to figure that out. And that it's great that there are so many options in so many different ways in our culture, but it also makes it more complicated. It's like, do you ever go to the store and just try to get like milk? There's like 50 different options. It's like you stand there and you're dumbfounded. And that's just milk, With relationships, it's the same thing. There's so much going on. I think tied in, I was talking about research before. One of the pieces of research says that people are more likely to have a secure attachment style if they identify positively with their culture. So whatever culture you're from, if you connect with your culture, you're more likely to have a secure attachment style. If you don't identify with your culture, if you don't even know what the culture is, because we're all so confused, it's going to make that a lot harder. Mm-hmm. We don't know what to expect. So that's kind of starting broader and coming in towards your question. I think since there are so many different options for ways people can be in a relationship, I think it's important to know, what is it that you want in a relationship? For people who are watching, you have to think, what do I want? What's important to me? Is it important that that the man bring in, be the breadwinner and the woman stay home? That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as both people are on the same page. Mm. People aren't on the same page, you have a problem. 50-50, that's great, as long as you're on the same page. I think some of the bigger problems come in when people are very rigid around it. So if we go to the traditional, man's going to bring home the bacon, or these days the tofu, whatever. And the woman's going to take care of the house. If he's like, all I have to do is I'm just going to bring home the money and then I'm putting my feet up and I don't have to do anything else, that's going to be a problem, likely. Because if it's that rigid, then he's not allowed to, it's even bad for him. He's not allowed to have any emotions. If there's things that upset him, he's got to put it in that closet that we were talking about. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not going to feel good. And she is going to feel totally powerless, like he's in control of everything, and that can be a problem. There are cultures where it's set up like that and that's supported, which probably makes it less of a problem. And then the women, maybe they have their own way of getting a different level of power, so it all balances out culturally. But we're in a culture where there's all these different options that I think you have to know, what do I want? How do I find a partner who is in sync with me? And then with whatever differences there are, which will come up because we're not the same people, mm-hmm. How do you work it out? If you have a way of resolving differences, then that's great. If you're on the same page, that's wonderful. But if you don't have a way of resolving differences, that's going to be a problem over time. I'm in a marriage where, we both work. That's great. It's not traditional. I'll tell you what, I told him probably over a decade ago, I like when he holds the car door for me. Every time we get in the car, he opens that door for me. Mm-hmm. I like that. There's nothing wrong with that. There are other women, I guess, who may not want a man to hold the door for them because they think it's, I don't know, whatever they think it is. So you have to find what works for you. I think that's the thing. That gets back to that self-awareness we were talking about. Yeah. Know you, know what you want, and it's okay what you want. be willing to discuss whatever the differences are. But if it's too big a gap to bridge, then maybe it's not the right relationship for you. Does that answer it?
It does. I'm stuck on the fact that people are too rigid in their beliefs and they're not willing to compromise or understand that coming into a relationship, there's going to be some level of compromise and you have to be open-minded about certain things.
Right.
So the big thing you spoke about that stuck out to me was the conflict resolution part. Because like you said, if it was a traditional role where the man just comes home, makes the bacon or the tofu, he may not be willing to argue with you. And he may be willing to say, listen, this is what I'm doing. I work hard, and basically be quiet and do your part. And I feel that now with all the education and knowledge that's out there, a lot of women say, hey, listen, I need that, and I need my emotions to be tapped into, and I need conversations to be had, and I want to feel loved, as opposed to a man saying, hey, listen, I thought the way that you felt love is by having this roof over your head.
Right. So. And he's got to hear if she's like, no, that's not enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think in that traditional role, I don't think that used to happen back in the day. I don't think that a lot of our parents or grandparents went to therapy. Actually, I know they didn't. Mm-hmm. And so I think in the roles of the women or the grandmothers, they did less talking back because, one, they couldn't go anywhere else and didn't have the means or the resources, and he was their resource. Right. So it was kind of like a contract that was just unspoken of.
Right.
And now we have so many people looking for a contract with all these clauses that nobody's agreeing to.
Right. Yeah. But here's the thing. That would seem like, oh, the women, they were just under his thumb and he was, he's up here. The truth is, he's also not doing so great in that relationship, because just because they're the man of the house doesn't mean that they're not sad or hurt or whatever. And if they're not allowed to talk about that, that's not so good for them either. So
I agree. I think that's what you're saying about not being in sync. I think we all have different terms. And I think these terms should be discussed from the beginning. Like if we're dating, and most women will say this, if we're dating, I don't want you dating someone else. Mm-hmm. And a man will come to the situation and say, hey, we're just dating, and I'm allowed to keep my options open. Right. And I think when that happens, I think that's your opening or her opening to say, hey, I don't want this. And she gives him the option to stay or to go. Mm-hmm. But I don't think those conversations are being had anymore, as opposed to the codependent part that I was touching on, where I've been on this site for so long and I'm just looking for somebody for the attention. And I think that's on both ends, because I feel that men are seeking the attention of multiple women at once, and a woman is just looking for the best out of her options out of all that attention.
I don't know about what I'm about to say. It's just my take. So much of this, I think, is tied into the whole cultural thing with the internet and so much information, and everything's based on what's like this. Everything's got to be going like this.
Instant gratification.
And we talked about the need to slow down and really reflect on what's coming in. But if the culture is you don't slow down, you don't reflect on what's going, you just do this. Mm-hmm. You got the 35 dates in 2 months, and whatever. And what do you do when that's the culture?
Yeah,
like it's folding in on itself, and it's probably tied to the whole. There are the mental health system for adolescents is exploding. There's so many more rehabs for them and such. I mean, what is wrong? What is going wrong? That kids hit adolescence, and so many of them are that distressed.
Yeah.
Right? There's something wrong. And I don't know if this is true. I have not looked into it. Somebody said they looked back, and the beginning of that was when cell phones came out. Not when they came out, but when the people actually started the smartphones. Right. That it goes back to that. I don't know if that's true or not. It makes some intuitive sense to me, but that doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah.
It's one of those you got to fact check things. Mm-hmm. But I do think that there's something in the way that we are connecting. People used to complain all the time that kids are just on their phones, right? They're just on their phones. It's not even like they're at a table. They're not even interacting. They're on their phones. They don't even care if they're together, right? Then COVID hits. Then kids aren't allowed to get together. And then we're talking about how kids are getting so messed up because they can't get together in person. All they can do is use their screens. That's like trying to have it both ways. So how do you make sense of that? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I think regardless of the phone, that's the need for human interaction. Like, I think
before COVID, they were saying the kids aren't interacting. That's why they're so messed up, because they're just on their phones and they don't want to interact.
Mm-hmm.
Then after COVID, they want to interact. They're not allowed to interact.
Yeah. I feel that's part of my conspiracy theory, but I think that's also part of the programming, because as long as you can keep them disconnected, then you can't push the program. And if you're not getting people together and we're just tied to our phones,
Mm-hmm.
then I can't see you and convince you that what I see or what I saw on my phone is true.
Okay.
So it's just people on the phone saying like. But if me and you are outside of this and I have a conversation like, hey, did you see so-and-so? And then you say, no, I haven't. And I show you so-and-so. Then now I'm like the buffer to making it true in a sense. That's just one of my theories.
So with my videos that I do, so most of the time it's okay because my stuff's not exactly controversial. But I will get some people who write some really nasty stuff. And then I respond. And I respond in a way that's not nasty. That's actually like a caring kind of response to what they're saying. I don't know that I think 100% of the time when that's happened, people have a really nice reply to me. Because I think they don't think that it's a human being that they're responding to, right? It's, yeah, I'm doing the video, but it's almost like I'm not a real human being. So they can be really nasty and hurtful. And if I just left it, I'd be like, ow. But when I actually can take the breath, take the time and respond, it flips it for them, which is really interesting to me. Because there's this anonymous thing. People just...
They think there's anonymity in their profile pictures or their name, or their username.
It's just, it's a name on a screen that like doesn't,
Yeah.
So they can vent whatever they want. Not good.
Yeah. No, I never understood it. I think, you know what? Back in our day, excuse me. Do parents say to kids, words shouldn't hurt you?
Mm-hmm.
Do they still say that nowadays? Because back in the day,
right.
we didn't have, we didn't have so much, we didn't have any access
mm-hmm.
to all these words being able to affect us.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like, you go to school, you see 50 kids a day,
mm-hmm.
10 of them say something bad. But now you get online, you see 1 million people a day and 100 of them saying something bad. So is it true?
Right.
I think that's a generational difference where, like how even when we sit here, like Amanda is 26, 27, 28, and I'm 45. I'm 45. Yeah, I'm 45. And I tell them, like, I really don't live in the comments because I don't know these people. And my whole thing is, my mom taught me, don't argue with nobody, and nobody doesn't know your last name or your middle name. Who are you arguing with?
Good way to put it.
Yeah. So when I see like a negative comment, my thing is, you have the option, like Instagram or other platforms give you the option. You can either block them, you can delete their comment, or you can restrict them. So I think there's 3 levels that you can choose, but like you chose to go around those levels and reply to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's more on you than it is on the commenter, because the commenter, again, it thinks it's anonymous and
right.
And 9 times out of 10, they got something else going on and they just want the attention.
Mm-hmm.
And again, my mom would say, don't give people attention.
Mm-hmm.
Or don't give negative people attention.
Right.
Why would you do that? And I think nowadays the children are feeling that they need to reply to everything in order to be part of a conversation, or part of a community or part of anything to feel relevant.
I think so much also comes back to, like I said, everything's moving fast, right? And if it's moving that fast, it's emotionally driven. There isn't a chance to sit back and say, well, how important is this, right? Is this person, or which thing do I want to respond? They're just like, it's just not a healthy way to lead a life. It's going to lead you to emotional destruction.
So maybe that's why there's so many mental campaigns going on, because they know that this whole thing is just not safe for us to be doing, because everything's going so fast and we're throwing so many things that they can react to,
mm-hmm.
be emotional about. Maybe they're saying, hey, we're doing all this, but the liability is, hey, we're or their responsibility is, we're giving you all these mental health sites to go to and all these clinics to go to and everything to deal with what we've done. Again, one of my theories.
I missed a couple of beats in there.
Well,
who's
if
the
Facebook,
things
the Meta, the marketing behind it, the programming behind it.
What about them?
What if they know that this is not safe for us to consume this much?
Which they do.
That's what, yeah, like how there was cigarettes, how there was alcohol, prohibition, everything like that.
Vaping these days.
Or vaping. So now the dangerous thing is information.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can have so much information about someone at any given point in time,
right,
that you won't even know what to do with that. And if you don't know what to do with that and you're going to overreact, here are some sites you could go to that will help you not feel less or feel more or feel better than, because you don't know what a person's real mental issue is.
That doesn't fix the problem, does it?
It doesn't. They're not looking to fix a problem. I don't think they're looking to fix it. I think they're looking to limit their liability of a problem they created. Which,
and I don't know much about this, but they're talking about the you guys probably know the sports gambling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how that's like huge, and it's really causing and it's going to like really cause such big problems. And I'm sure they'll do the same thing. Oh, if you have a problem, go here.
Well, they have it at the bottom.
Right. So, but meanwhile, they're creating more of a problem. We like to say, not me, not me, not me. It's just these people, as if,
Again, to separate us and divide us.
Tying back to my field, so people are struggling, so then they need health. Like they need healthcare. And the healthcare industry is ridiculous. The amount of money they earn and the amount of denials they put out there. I read, it was last month, one of the insurance companies, their processor person, called a physician, a physician out of surgery. She was giving this woman, I think it was removing your breast for cancer or something. Pulled her out of surgery to question the surgery. She's like, and so the physician was like, right, it's like, do you realize that I'm actually in the surgery doing this? Yes, and we want to make sure that it's needed. Because you know why? Because then they could save the money. Profits.
All right, so we just had a lovely conversation with Dr. Leslie Becker-Phelps. This is the follow-up book, The Insecure in Love Workbook, to the first book, Insecure in Love. I'd like to thank you for coming on. Can you tell the people where they can find you?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. This has really been fun. They can find me at my website, which is drbeckerphelps.com, DRBECKER-PHELPS.com.
Thank you. Please join us next week. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow. And until next time,